Please take a seat. We are going to get started. Yes, please take your seats. For this portion of the program, I would ask that you please silence your cell phones. We're going to have a lot of musical offerings, and we don't want to disrupt the performers. So, good afternoon. My name is Jen Pearl, and I'll be moderating this afternoon's panel. The second panel of our international conference entitled The Beauty of the Diversity of Cultures. In just a few minutes, we're going to play a short excerpt of Lyndon LaRouche speaking in 1995 at the Vista Hotel in Washington, D.C. In this clip, he is speaking about a musical composition entitled Jesu, Meine, Freude, which means Jesus, my joy, by Johann Sebastian Bach, which you're going to hear some selections of in a little bit. It was in the period of the early 2000s, in the aftermath of 9/11, when Mr. LaRouche built a youth movement of students and young people who were disgusted and angry with the Bush-Cheney launching of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which began the period of decades of what we now call the forever wars. LaRouche's idea was to absolutely stand up against these terrible things, but also to build a movement of young people who could be philosopher kings in the face of evil, and most importantly, not be defined by the terrible current outlook and culture, but to create a new and better vision of humanity. Therefore, while we were out organizing in the streets, we were also studying Kepler and Bach to understand how to come to discover something, not by somebody telling you, but by going through a process of discovery in your own mind. This Jesu, Meine, Freude composition by Bach was the foundation of that intensive curriculum that he launched. Because it is a choral piece, it requires many voices singing together to convey one intention. Although many of the political organizers at the time were not trained singers, in fact, many had never sung a note in their lives, we trained many young people to discover their beautiful voices. And very quickly, this complex and beautiful motet became the anthem of our movement, sung in offices, meetings, conferences, and all over the streets of the United States. There was a period early on when I, along with others who moved to Boston to help build our movement there, were beginning our days every single day with a 2-hour choral rehearsal of the Jesu, Meine, Freude. In fact, there were times when we would sing parts of that piece in the middle of Harvard Square with our political table and signs against the wars and for economic development, and people would stop and they would listen. And some would even come on over and jump right into the chorus and sing. The beautiful thing about the Jesu, Meine, Freude, which you will hear excerpts of in a few minutes, is that it is a masterful contrapuntal dialogue between the congregation and St. Paul. The congregation, or the people, are represented by the singing of 6 chorales. The chorales are modeled on the original church hymn, whose melody is always heard in the first soprano, but underneath that melody, the rest of the voices are weaving a beautiful transformation through dissonance and resolution. Excerpts of St. Paul's letters to the Romans are set to music by Bach and inserted between the chorales as a way of uplifting, organizing, and challenging the congregation to be better. This motet is truly a microcosm of what culture should be. In a few minutes, you will hear a selection of those chorales developed by Bach in a really unique way. And you'll hear one of those pieces set to St. Paul, which is for all women's voices, from St. Paul 8:2, which says, "For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and death." Immediately following that piece, you will hear Trotz, which says, Defy the old dragon, defy the jaws of death, defy the fear of them, rage, world, and quake. I stand here and sing in certain peace. Those words were certainly the words that Lyndon LaRouche lived and led by, and we should take to heart as well in this fight for a beautiful humanity. And with that, now we can go to the clip. Thank you.
One of the things which was most delicious was we stopped in Leipzig, and I had a very unusual experience in the sense of participating for several hours in auditing the rehearsal of the Thomaner Chor in Leipzig. And then the next evening, at the evening Vesper service, hearing the performance of the complete repertoire for that week at the service and being able to compare what had been gone through with the rehearsal and what was heard in the evening. Now, let me just qualify for those who may not know it. Some of you here do know this. The Thomas Cathedral Choir is a separate school, has been in existence since the year AD 1212. It has, according to all reputation, an unbroken singing program that it would sing every week on Friday evening at Vesper service. And that's been going on since AD 1212. The nearest thing they had to a break was in the middle of the Black Death in the middle of the 14th century, at which point they were down to 3 boys because the Black Death was killing off the singers, but they still sang. So the word is that they've sung for almost 800 years. Now, the discipline is tremendous. The cantor who is conducting the performance is himself a product of the school, and was a very trained musician, about 40 years of age, but a full bearer of the tradition. Let me just identify the tradition, and then I'll come back to in due course what it bears on here. Every week, these boys, who range from 7 to about 18, that is, it's a secondary school program, they are chosen for their voice and their musicality. But they're given a full gymnasium education, like a secondary school, from that time until they complete graduation. Their musical work is done as a part of the total program of studies. Each week, from the beginning of the week until Friday, 4 days a week, normally, except this particular week where they only have 3 days because of a holiday. 4 days or 3 days a week in this case. They start from scratch with a completely new repertoire for that week's Friday evening Vesper service. They learn from scratch. They then perform on Friday, and the following week take up a complete new program. So in about 3 years or so, they've gone through pretty much the entire Bach motet and cantata repertoire. And they won't forget it, I assure you. They never will forget it. I saw the performance. Not only are they well trained, but this particular discipline is very important. I've seen perhaps not as many rehearsals as some of you have seen, but I've seen a number. And I can tell you the density in the rehearsals, the density of direction was about as intense as I've ever seen. But the boys were responsive and trained and able to do it. During the 3-hour rehearsals, there was a break of about 15 minutes, in which these very serious, intent young boys and older boys, sitting in their chairs, cross-legged otherwise, but nonetheless singing and very intent in the most professional manner, suddenly turned into boys, fresh boys. And they raced out of the area into the yard, played soccer, then came back in as fresh as they had left and sat down sedately, or as sedately as boys can do, in their chairs, and they concentrated totally on what they were doing. So it was total concentration and total training and a masterful direction. Now, the particular work, which was the featured work of the Friday program, which they were rehearsing this Thursday morning when we were in there, Thursday noontime, was Jesu, Meine, Freude, which is one of the most difficult motets to perform adequately, not to perform it, but perform it adequately in the motet repertoire. It has challenges in there which are rather astonishing. The boys were learning it. The direction was intense. The management of the direction was intense. Nothing passed. Everything was corrected. Diction, approaches, everything was involved. The following evening, I missed the intervening rehearsal, which was done as the dress rehearsal in the morning on Friday. But we were at the evening rehearsal, and I tell you, one of the few times in recent years hearing a musical performance, the tears came spontaneously flowing out of my eyes. Couldn't hold them back. The performance was magnificent. Everything that they had been taught, that they had rehearsed, and the correction came through in the performance. And better, of course, much better. The boys came in intent. There were about 80 of them. Two groups, the young boys who were the pre-voice change and the young men who were the older after voice change. They came in with a counter behind, every one of them fully concentrated as a music performer, prepared to perform. And that moment of total concentration is required before you've got the idea of your composition in your head, before you start to perform. They came marching in with that idea in their head, a full program. They performed with precision, with shaping of tone. They sang not on the notes, but they sang between the notes. They knew how to do that. They were trained for that. It's the most remarkable performance of Jesu, Meine, Freude I've ever heard. And it was more remarkable because I had experienced part of the process of its production in the sense of participating in the rehearsals. And therefore, as you know, you have a much keener sense of the composition when you listen to the rehearsals. And you're sweating as to how it's going to come out in the final, actually, outflow of the performance.
I'd like to invite the chorus, please, to line up and come up. And as they're coming up, I'm excited to announce our first physical printing of the Leonora. This is the spring 2025 edition, our Art, Science, and Statescraft magazine. In here, you can find various articles on Lincoln, a recent work by Helga Zepp-LaRouche, some new articles by some of our younger members on Poe. You can purchase a copy of this at the lit table, a physical copy for $20, or you can get a digital copy by becoming a recurring Schiller Institute member for $5 a month. So. Thank you, Schiller Institute Festival Chorus and Maestro John Sigerson. I'd like to remind you, please, to silence your cell phones. We're going to have a lot of musical offerings, this panel. We don't want to disrupt the performers. It is now my deepest honor to introduce to you the founder of the Schiller Institute, who will be addressing us from Germany, Helga Zepp-LaRouche.
Hello. I want to speak to you why we need the true international renaissance. There is a tremendous echo. When the Schiller Institute was founded 41 years ago in 1984, it was in a period where we were already once very close to World War III. We had the medium-range missile crisis, the SS-20 and Pershing II crisis in Europe. And, you know, there was a period where hundreds of thousands of people went in the streets against that. And we had a turmoil on both sides of the Atlantic, nothing compared to now, but it was a period of crisis for sure. So I had the idea that we needed to have a think tank to celebrate the art of statecraft. Politics should not be just, you know, running for office every 4 years or 2 years and, you know, trying to get your post, but it should be done by people who have a vision to actually make the state beautiful and functioning well for the people. So statecraft was the main purpose, but that would only be possible if we would fight for a new world economic order, which would give justice to all nations on the planet. And that would only be possible, so I was convinced, that if we combine it with a renaissance of all the great traditions of all countries, throughout history. Now, the idea was that we would have such a dialogue to spark some new renaissance. Now, if you look back 41 years later, that goal of the Schiller Institute was actually quite prophetic, because we are now in the early phase of the formation of a new world economic order coming from the global south so far. And, there are some countries who actually do appreciate a lot their own high traditions. However, it is not even, because in the West, we have in the United States and in Europe a tremendous cultural decline, while the Asian countries in particular are reviving their ancient tradition, 5,000 years of beautiful poetry, sculpture, architecture, painting, philosophy, and combining it with a vision for the future. Now, the fact that Asia is doing that and the so-called West is not doing it, in my view, has a lot to do with the reason why we have right now a situation where no longer the West is leading, but Asia has become the locomotive of the world economy. If you look at the culture in Europe and the United States, you see a lot of drugs, drug violence, video games, video violence, school shootings. You have a mostly degraded culture coming from Hollywood. In Europe, it is a little bit different, but not better. It's just a different emphasis. The present Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, already a couple of years ago, in his New Year's address, said that this has to do everything with the fact that the West has abandoned Christian values and replaced them with post-Christian liberal values, with the idea everything is allowed, everything goes. So he basically said that the West is relentlessly trying to impose these Western values to all non-Western countries. He said, these are probably not the values espoused by the grandfathers of today Europeans, but something new and modernized, a free for all, I would say. They are radically and fundamentally at odds with the values handed down from generation to generation for centuries in our country, which we would like to cherish and hand down to our children and grandchildren. When during foreign policy battles, we and many others face a demand to accept these new post-Christian values, including permissiveness and universality of liberal approaches to the life of the individual, I think it is indecent on a human level, but in terms of professional diplomats, it's a colossal mistake and a completely unacceptable overestimation of your influence on international relations. Now, the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union disintegrated, led to an exuberant reaction by the side of the West, especially the neocons on both sides of the Atlantic. Francis Fukuyama famously even talked about that the end of history had come. And what that meant was that now communism basically defunct, at least in the Soviet Union, that liberal democracy would spread all over the world into all continents, combining liberal democratic systems, neoliberal economics, plus naturally the liberal values of woke culture, the LGBTQ, plus many, many other letters in the meantime. And they try to spread that to Russia, to China, Hungary, Africa, and there was a complete rejection by all of these countries because they regarded it as completely contrary to their own ancient traditions of thousands of years. Now, the British, who have been using these degraded liberal cultures to manipulate and, sort of nudge the populations into a system of belief where they could control them more easily, they have been deploying this, like all empires before, very consciously. Now, one of the leading mouthpieces of the British Empire, Lord William Rees-Mogg, who was the editor or the publisher of the London Times, I think, for a long time, he once criticized Samuel Huntington, who had famously put out the book, The Clash of Civilization, where he had predicted that unavoidably it would come to a clash between Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Confucianism. And he advanced the notion that the real conflict would play out instead between the old values of Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Confucianism on the one side, and the new values of the New Age neoliberal society and modernity. And that is exactly what we are seeing worldwide. Now, if one listens to the representatives of the rules-based order, the world now is divided between democracies and autocracies or dictatorships. Now, the British method and the oligarchical method has always been to manipulate populations. When some years ago they put out a movie called The Gladiator, which was, a play of some gladiator in the Roman Empire, the British press had articles asserting that, you need such low-level culture or counterculture, which appeals to the lowest instincts of the people, because you need that to manipulate the masses, because only when they have the lowest instincts, the lowest feelings, the lowest degraded, wishes and desires, that you can control them. Now, that has been done by all empires, by Rome, who had the circus, where the lions could eat Christians, or the gladiators would fight against each other. And the viewers, the audience, was pulled into the game by being asked by the emperor of either pulling the thumb up or thumb down, which would give life to the gladiator, or the gladiator would die. And in that way, entangling the population, the audience, into the sadistic kind of, manipulation of the emotions. And this is exactly what pop music is doing today. If you listen carefully to the texts and also the appropriate appealing to the sensory apparatus of Madonna, or Black Gothic, or certain other pop musics, you can actually demonstrate that it is satanic. Now, in Western civilization, there were basically two models of the state. And this difference has been best described by Schiller's writings about the legislation of Lykurg and Solon, where Sparta, the state of Lykurg, is the oligarchical model, where everything is done for the state and to please a privileged elite, and there are helots, slaves, who can be killed periodically whenever they get too many. And on the other side, the republican model of Solon and the city of Athens, as the state model where the aim is the progression and the perfection of the people. Now, this oligarchical model over the centuries and millennia has been described by Lyndon LaRouche like a slime mold. It changes the color, it changes the outlook, but it remains essentially the same. So there is a striking similarity among thinkers, who are from the positive side, what does it require to uplift the population? And if you look at some of the best thinkers, poets, and artists in all cultures, even if they come from completely diverse cultural circles, they nonetheless come to the same insights about the nature of man and the purpose of its existence. The most auspicious example of this concordance is that of the philosophical and aesthetical principle of Confucius, whose influence has impacted many parts of Asia well beyond China for the last 2,500 years, with those of the German poet of freedom, Friedrich Schiller. Both dedicated their lives to work on the ennoblement of man, and an important similarity of this idea that all art has only one goal, namely to improve the population, to ennoble the population, and have the population develop in a harmonious way all of their talents. Such thinkers were Mencius, Nikolaus of Cusa, Gottfried Leibniz, Wilhelm von Humboldt, to name just a few. Common to all of these great minds was the tireless struggle with the question on how life together among human beings can be shaped such that the inherent creative capability within them can unfold in the best way and be brought into a concordance with the world order such that the natural law's right to happiness can be attained by the entire society. Both Confucius and Schiller have an ideal of man where they both say, that no matter where you start, you can reach this idealistic conception of a perfected man through aesthetic education, through great classical art, because great classical art appeals to a sense of beauty, because it appeals both to reason and the senses. Schiller says that you start with a notion of beauty, which is not coming from experience, but it is created by reason. And then if you find a correspondence in real life, that confirms the idea of beauty you had, but it also appeals to the senses. And by being beautiful, it ennobles the senses continuously until these emotions are on the same level of reason. In the prologue to the drama Bridge of Messina, Schiller says that great art evokes a power in the soul that remains, even if you leave the theater or the concert hall. That power of the great art resonates for days and more to follow. Unfortunately, that same effect also happens when you expose yourself to ugly theater, movies, music, and the like. This is why Plato said that children should not be permitted to watch plays of the Greek tragedians, because he said that the absolute bloody and many times violent scenery would hurt the soul of the children. Now, if you apply that today, the children have no chance with the video game violence, with the internet access to the most perverse contents. But, if you now look at the result of these two, let's say, two models of either letting everything go in the West or trying to ennoble the population, if you look at the result, well, the countries who promote the high expressions of traditional cultures, like Asian or African societies, you see that they bloom and blossom. And the West, with the so-called post-Christian values, the outcome is clear. The West is inflicting its own demise. So what is the remedy of that? Now, the West has to undo the many layers of cultural social engineering, where a whole topic would be the manipulation of the Congress of Cultural Freedom, which was a gigantic CIA operation in the post-war period, working all over the world, but especially in Europe, but also Asia, Africa, United States. And it tried to absolutely consciously cut the people from the roots of their classical culture and replace it with atonal music, 12-tone music, all kinds of modernistic paintings and culture, and eventually ended in wokeism and the present Dadaism, deconstructionism, where you can do anything and it's called art. So obviously the only chance we have in the West to undo the damage this neoliberal so-called culture, or better counterculture, which started with the rock sex counterculture in the 60s or 50s, which Lyndon LaRouche, by the way, was the only person who clearly recognized the long-term damage this would have on the cognitive potential of the population, and absolutely go back to our best traditions, all the Renaissances, the classical periods, especially of European culture, but also reviving the great traditions of all other cultures. And that means we have to revive the works and contributions of what has been slandered as the dead old white males and females for that matter. And we need a renaissance of the best all cultures have produced. Now, Tsai Yuan-pei, who was a Chinese person living from the end of the 18th century into the 19th century into the 20th century. He was the first education minister of the Republic of China under Sun Yat-sen. He had actually taught for several years in Leipzig, where he acquainted the aesthetic education of Schiller and Humboldt, and he brought it back to China by mixing it with Chinese ideas. And he basically introduced the concept of aesthetic education into China. He came to the conclusion that any progress in the history of mankind only happened when one culture encountered the best products of another culture or civilization, and they had basically a dialogue among them. And this is why I think we absolutely, if we want to get the West out of this present dark age in which we find ourselves in, we absolutely need the dialogue of cultures, and we can only save ourselves through a dialogue with the global majority. And that is what I wanted to tell you.
I would like to welcome to the podium mezzo-soprano, formerly with the New York Metropolitan Opera, Elvira Green.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. What I would like to discuss is the role of beauty in adversity, or how to be an angel in darkness. In my capacity as the artistic/music director, I have worked in the last 29 years with children and young people in opera camps, summer schools, and on the performances of scenes from plays as well. They have to work on all phases of that process, from making the costumes to memorizing, and of course, performing their roles. There are lessons that can last a lifetime that are learned in the course of a summer or a semester in preparing and performing the great works of art. I like to think of Mozart's last opera, The Magic Flute, as a love letter to children, to the genius of children that Mozart himself so exemplified. In The Magic Flute, toward the end, the hero and heroine, Tamino and Pamina, use the magic flute, the power of music, to walk through fire and ice. One thinks of that as the ice of white-hot hatred, and the fire of white-hot hatred, and the ice of frozen indifference. Art, especially music, is able to dispel both of these negative influences when the heart and the mind of the artist are at one and in the service of a higher power than self. Artists should, as Paul Robeson did, aspire to be the conscious of their place and time. President John F. Kennedy once said, "If sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, makes him aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential." I see little of more importance to the future of our country and our civilization than full recognition of the place of the artist. But art goes way beyond national boundaries, as President Kennedy well knew. In dedicating what would later become to call the Kennedy Center, he said, "Oculus and Plato are remembered today, long after the triumphs of imperial Athens are gone. Dante outlived the ambitions of 13th century Florence. Goethe stands serenely above the politics of Germany. And I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered not for victories or defeats in battle or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit. These are the times when words like that matter most. These are the times when poetry, even more than prose, matters most. These are the times when the power of music to move people from the inside out proves to them that they still have an inside. That ice of indifference and the fire of hatred are like scales which can fall away from the heart when the breath of music is breathed into it. Dry bones must be watered. They can be refreshed by the water of truth, the water of love, by the water of justice. quote, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream," end quote. A king once said. Should artists be the conscience of America, as the saying goes? It's a tough job, but someone has to do it. How tough is it? The classical artist of African American descent has had to embody that artistry as well as confront that responsibility in a unique fashion. 100 years ago, the great tenor Roland Hayes, which I will say at this moment, whose daughter, Africa Hayes, I have the honor of chatting with every 2 weeks at 96 years old. Roland Hayes was critiqued by some of his contemporaries for sounding too white. When he appeared in concert in Berlin, Germany, on May 10th in 1924, however, he was loudly booed by the 1,000-person audience. That continued almost 10 minutes, during which Hayes stood with his head up, his eyes closed, and said nothing. As the noise quieted, he signaled his accompanist to begin. As Hayes began to sing Franz Schubert, Du bist die Ruhe, the audience fell silent. When he concluded, they remained silent. One person applauded, then others. Cheers began, and then men began pounding their walking sticks. How did Hayes keep his composure? He prayed, "God, please blot out Roland Hayes so that the people will only see thee." Some people think music has a color. Does justice have a color? Does truth? Some people seem to think they do. Let's think. We speak of the weight of justice, but how much does justice actually weigh? We speak of the force of truth. How many pounds per square inch of force does truth exert? Ideas can move the soul and thereby move the world, even though they do not have physical power in the way that people think. Our words can become flesh, and our songs can become laws. The Sermon on the Mount says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." But how can peace be made? When nations and their people find themselves once again gripped by consciousness through the song of beautiful art, only then will a durable peace occur. The artist must strive to free the nations from the fires of hatred and the ice of indifference. Through song, through drama, through poetry, which carries the force of law through the power of beauty, and which compels the soul to once again see itself and to once again hear its own voice. Blessed are the artists who can, as they once did long ago, become the lawmakers. And contrary to modern practice, artists, while always present, must strive to be invisible so that the people can see the higher power in themselves and can hear not the artists, but their own voices singing. If we can do that, we will have shown them that they have the power to change things as they are. We will have shown them that they are capable of fulfilling the promise of their higher, better selves. On my journey now, Mount Zion, my journey now, Mount Zion. Well, I couldn't be nowhere, Mount Zion, but my journey now, Mount Zion. One day, I was walking along. Well, my soul got happy, and I was singing my song. On my journey now, Mount Zion, my journey now, Mount Zion. Well, I wouldn't take nothing, Mount Zion, for my journey now, Mount Zion. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvira. That was beautiful. Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage my dear friend, current president of the Schiller Institute in the United States, Megan Dobrodt.
Humanity needs a new golden renaissance. Helga Zepp-LaRouche first introduced to me the idea that a renaissance doesn't just happen. It doesn't come along as an accidental blessing of the tides of history. A renaissance is made. It is created by the intention and passion of those who become convinced that mankind's nature is more noble than its current condition. They strive to find the very best in their history, in their nation's art, music, poetry, drama, philosophy, and insist that those things be brought forth as the foundation, the catalyst of a new culture. There have been many beautiful Renaissance periods in human history. The Islamic Golden Age, beginning in the 8th century in Baghdad. The Andalusian Renaissance of the 10th and 11th centuries in southern Spain. The Sung dynasty's Confucian Renaissance, beginning in 11th century China. And the Florence-centered Golden Renaissance of the 15th century, to name a few. We, today, have the potential to unleash a renaissance greater than all of those. In those periods, while one part of the world flourished under a beautiful culture, many other parts suffered under a dark age. Today, for the first time, we have the possibility for a flourishing of classical culture across the entire globe, involving all of humanity simultaneously. So what I'd like to take up is what we ought to mean by classical. Classical does not denote a time period, a particular geographic area, or something that is old. The term classical, properly used, refers to a principle of the human mind, the power of creative reason by which we are able to make discoveries of principles of our universe and to communicate them to others. Classical culture refers to those works of art that strive to access, develop, and enrich this capability of the human soul. Lyndon LaRouche wrote in his 1992 paper, The Classical Idea, Natural and Artistic Beauty, the purpose of art is to celebrate and strengthen the noblest state of mind which the individual person can achieve, and to aid thus in making us better people. It is a contribution best and most naturally celebrated in the manner agape prescribes, by an intensification of that anti-erotic quality of emotion we associate with childlike tears of joy. The most precious gift we may receive is the means to bring forth the force of agape to rule our minds and guide our actions at will. Artistic beauty is a lever by means of which we are enabled to do just that. That is the purpose of art in general, and music in particular, according to the classical idea. That is, I might imagine, a different idea, not just of classical, but also of the role and purpose of art than you may be accustomed to. It's certainly the opposite of everything, or almost everything, happening out there under the assumed name of art nowadays. What was expressed by LaRouche is a universal idea, because it refers to a universal quality of the human mind, the human soul, that distinguishes all of us from mere animals. So let's delve into that a little bit more. What is this noblest state of mind that Lyndon LaRouche referred to? What is unique about human thinking as opposed to animal thinking? As human beings, we lead a paradoxical existence. On the one hand, we walk around in animal bodies, which, as far as bodies go, aren't particularly special compared to much of the natural world. Our bodies experience all kinds of things via the faculties of our senses. We observe phenomena. We notice patterns of some things. Some of them we'd like to avoid in the future. Others we might like to pursue. We might notice the fact that each day the sun rises. It passes overhead and it sets on the other side of the horizon. If we're more astute, we might also notice the spot in which it rises isn't exactly the same day to day. It changes over the course of the year. We might notice other things in the sky, like certain stars that don't stay in fixed constellations, but seem to move about freely, sometimes taking paths against the backdrop of the other stars that look like loop-de-loops. These rogue stars earned the name planet or wanderer by the ancient Greeks. All of these and other observed phenomena and the patterns they make are available to our senses and to the brain. The other part of our existence involves the human mind, something different than the brain. The mind is able to generate from itself, not from experience, but from its own notions of fitness, goodness, beauty, and efficiency, an idea of cause. What is the efficient cause behind an observed phenomenon? Why are the planets moving at all? What is the efficient cause behind a multiplicity of related and paradoxical phenomena? Cause is not something you can see. You can't touch, taste, or smell it. Cause is an idea. It's the answer to the question, why did God create it this way and not otherwise? Cause has no color or shape, no particular physical attributes, and yet each cause has a very specific and knowable character, a mode of action, which, though it was first generated as an idea within one specific human mind, is potentially communicable to and knowable by all other human minds. Thus, universal and true ideas of cause, of principle, are created by the incredible faculty we call the human mind. What I've just described, at least in very broad strokes, is the basis of science and of all improvement of the human condition over millennia. Now, how does this relate to art? Great poetry, take in the English language the works of Shelley, Shakespeare, Poe, Dunbar, for example. Great poetry says something so precise that it could not have been said in literal speech. In a great poem, the subject matter is not and could not be represented in any of the literal statements or images of the poem. It cannot be given a name which is simpler than the poem in its entirety. To say, the subject of this poem is immortality, or the subject is the pain of loss, or the joy of discovery, is as meaningless and about as unfunny and unsuccessful as delivering the punchline of a joke without the setup. The subject matter of poetry is the unutterable idea that lies between the words and only comes into being as a thought recreated within the mental processes of another mind in the silent space at the conclusion of the poem. The beauty of a classical poem is the realization that the poet was able to induce in you a precise thought, his or her precise thought, which you generated as your thought. And so, with great art, we are confronted face to face with the universality of the human mind and of creativity as a universal phenomenon. And that carries with it an emotion of love, of agape, the recognition of yourself in the other, and of the true and the good in both of you. Ideas which are worthy of embodiment in great poetry are, by their nature, more noble than those mundane thoughts and emotions which predominate day-to-day life. They lift us for a period of time toward the ideal. What can be said of poetry can be said 100-fold of great music. Classical music is that which takes the natural beauty of the developed singing voice and its imitators in musical instruments and the medium of the well-tempered system to embody in the medium of sound through the use of polyphony, counterpoint, irony, and freedom from the linear experience of time, the unfolding of a single idea, a universal thought which governs each moment of the performance over the course of a few minutes, sometimes many minutes, sometimes more than an hour. The great conductor Wilhelm Furtwängler addresses this in a writing on J.S. Bach. In Bach's music, we find concentration on the moment in time, united with the unheard expanse, the immediate realization of the part paired with the truly sovereign overall vision of the whole, with its ever-conscious feeling for the near and the far at the same time, with its unconstrained fulfillment of the here and now, joined with an ever-present subconscious feeling for the structure, the current of the whole. Bach's music is a greater example of biological certainty of purpose and natural power than we will find anywhere else in music. Bach, the creator of these choruses and these fugues, seems to be not a human being, but the spirit that rules the world, the very architect of the universe. In classical music, we are thus invited to participate in a distilled and concentrated expression of universal creativity. It is thus that great classical art subsumes scientific discovery and provides the most powerful basis available to us for a dialogue of civilizations. Lyndon LaRouche wrote of this power of classical culture, saying, "In all respects, the leading role of human creativity, including physical scientific creativity, is located not in mathematics, but in the dynamic role of that power of creative artistic imagination of classical music, poetry, drama, and comparable expression of the classical visual arts. It is this subjective element in human nature which is the locus of true creativity in physical science and otherwise, and thus of the absolute superiority of man over beast. This is the ultimate secret of success in economy. This is the indispensable function of classical artistic culture. That is the standard that we must insist on today for our culture, each of us, in whatever country we may reside, in whatever language we speak. We must look back, reach back to the best and most beautiful things that our respective cultures have produced and make them the center of our daily lives, of our children's lives, and of our social lives. Gottfried Leibniz wrote that each monad, each simple substance, each soul, is a living mirror, a mirror endowed with internal action, which represents the whole universe from its own point of view and is as ordered as the universe itself. We can consider cultures in this way as well. Because classical art, no matter if it's Chinese, American, German, Persian, or from whatever place, embodies that which is human in us. It is universal. And yet different cultures reflect those universal ideas in unique ways. This lends an incredible richness to the human culture that greatly increases the power of our insight into universal ideas and the role of creativity in our developing universe. Imagine a child growing up in the environment of a beautiful classical culture in dialogue with other beautiful classical cultures from many different countries around the world. What a richness of thought, of emotion, and of mind is available to that young person. I am fully convinced that humanity is on the verge of a completely new epoch in our development, one in which we will leave behind forever the childhood diseases of colonialism, war, underdevelopment, and poverty. These terrible things will cease to be phenomena among human beings, relegated forever to a past era in our development, and something that children will learn of only as matters of history. This is not wishful thinking. It is a lawful part of the natural development of our Earth and our universe, as we are the creative species, the only species we know of which is capable of furthering the self-development of the universe as a willful act. Let us bring about a new classical human culture, a new global golden renaissance to enable that era to bloom.
Thank you, Megan. Due to some time constraints of some of our musicians, I'm going to swap the program around a little bit. As you see in your program, we are going to take a musical trip around the world now. and through the world and through time, and hear a diverse program of traditional and classical music from Albania, Iran, China, Brazil, from Mozart, Rachmaninoff, and Brahms, to continue to foster that dialogue of culture. Our program will begin with music from Albania, and then we're going to have Ruijia and Yulin after that. I'm just going to swap some things around, okay? Our program will begin with music from Albania. Soprano Feride Istogu Gillisberg is a leading member of the Schiller Institute in Denmark and founder and head of the Lola Gjoka Society in Denmark. She began the Lola Gjoka Society to revive the spirit and preserve the history of the first Albanian pianist and folk song arranger, Lola Gjoka, who was at the center of a cultural renaissance in Albania in 1932. Following Feride, we will hear from Chinese mezzo-soprano Ruijia Dong, who is currently pursuing a Master of Music at Mann's School of Music, and tenor Yulin Wang, pursuing a Master of Music degree at Manhattan School of Music. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful offerings. We are now going to take a detour trip to Iran, where we will hear Dr. Nader Majd and Dr. Ali Reza Analoui. Dr. Majd is the founder of the Center for Persian Classical Music and was born in Sari, Iran. Began studying and playing the santur, or Persian hammered dulcimer, and violin at the age of 6. Dr. Ali Reza Analoui, born in Isfahan, Iran, began playing the tombak and daf, pre-Islamic drums of Persia, at the age of 10. As a young musician, he performed with many prominent Persian musicians and is the founder of the Sama ensemble. Please welcome them to the stage.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Good evening. I just want to say a few words. We're competing with Mozart, so I wanted to talk about the framework of this song we're playing. Because of the existence of the quarter tones in the Persian classical music, we have more scales than in the Western music. We have 1 major and maybe 3 minors and so on. But we have 7 scales and 5 subscales and 440 segments that make up the scale. And our music is not tonal, it's mostly modal. And this, the framework we're playing tonight goes back to 2,500 years ago. At the time of the Sassanid dynasty, they used to have music for each day of the week. And they were called 1 Goth, 2 Goth, and Goth, meaning the verses of the Zoroastrian religion at that time in Iran. So this is the framework for the 3rd week, days of the week, which is called 3 Goth, okay? I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Means the string, and it's the mother of guitar.
Thank you very much. I would like to now welcome tenor Everett Suttle, internationally known opera singer and founding member tenor of the Schiller Institute NYC Chorus. He will perform 3 pieces and will be joined by soprano Michelle Aaron for Schwesterlein.
tischkesem eo sertau nause mais, sertau, ai voasulau, vai contar companiero, Schwesterlein, Schwesterlein, wann gehen wir nach Haus?
Morgen, wenn die Hähnen krähen, wollen wir nach Haus zu gehen. Brüderlein, Brüderlein, dann gehen wir nach Haus.
Schwesterlein, Schwesterlein, wann gehen wir nach Haus?
Morgen, wenn der Tag anbricht, ehend die Freude nicht. Brüderlein, Brüderlein, der fröhliche Braus.
Schwesterlein, Schwesterlein, wohl ist es Zeit.
Mein Liebster, tanzt mit mir, geh ich, tanzt mit ihr. Brüderlein, Brüderlein, lass du mich heut.
Schwesterlein, Schwesterlein, was bist du blass?
Das macht der Morgenschein auf meinen Wingerlein. Brüderlein, Brüderlein, die vom Tau
thank you to all our musicians today. I'd now like to welcome John Sigerson, the Director of Music for the Schiller Institute, up to the stage. Now it's your turn to sing.
When Lyndon LaRouche started the Manhattan, what he called the Manhattan Project, which also included building a chorus, he said that we needed about a chorus of about 1,000 people. And so this here is a good start, I think. Because when we're talking about music, I just thought that the best way to really get a sense of it is to do it. And I want to involve you in that. Before I ask you to stand and sing, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. I hope that all of you have in your hands this score that was handed out to you. If not, you can ask somebody to get it for you. A couple of comments just about these things, these printed things. These are footprints of footprints. By that I mean that this is just a writing down of a description of sort of what it's supposed to be like, which is then made into sound. But I want to tell you a secret that, and I think Megan indicated this quite well in her presentation. Music is not sound. And to say it's just between the sounds, well, let's just look a little bit about that. What it really, yes, it's between the sounds, but it's everything that isn't the sounds. For instance, an interval, right? You think of an interval in music, right, which is going either up or down. And when you're thinking you've got a note, and then you're singing another note, but there's an interval between the two notes. And your mind actually, I mean, you can sit there and wallow in the beauty of the first note, and then wallow in the beauty of the second note. But that's really not the point. It's the question of the movement from one to the next. How you do it, how beautifully you do it, how well you do it, and how well in tune it is as well. So all of those things add up to what you really call harmony. That is, there's a misconception that harmony is somehow something static. And it has to do with chords and things like that. No, harmony is movement, it is motion. It is the motion of development and the unfolding of an idea. And the reason why I picked this particular piece is because it's able to give you access to that unfolding process by actually doing it. Mozart wrote this piece. It's called Ave Verum Corpus, a Hail True Body, and which is about contemplation of the body of Christ on the cross. And he wrote it in July 1791. It was just about bare 6 months before he passed away. And it's one of, and he wrote it during the time, by the way, that he was working on the magic flute that Elvira was talking about earlier on. And he took a couple of days out of time because he wrote it for a friend of his who had a local church, very beautiful small church, with probably a small chorus. And he wrote this in an extremely concentrated fashion so that it's very short, but it has it has everything in it that really opens up an idea of a higher purpose for musical composition. So if you take a look at it, I want to point out before, and again, while you're seated, can I have an A? Yeah, right. Just look here. You have soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, because it's 4 parts. So, and those are the 4 basic types of human voices that we have now on Earth. It'll be interesting to hear to know how that's going to work on Mars, given the gravity and so forth. Things might change quite a bit. Might have different types of voices because of the whole way things work. But for now, we have sopranos, altos. Most children they're born, they grow up as sopranos, and then their voices change and unfold to these other different types of voices. I want you to look at the very first 2 notes. Once again, is that it? Yeah, right. Just look at that first note. Let's look at the 3 notes. Don't sing it, but I'm just gonna. Okay, that's 3 notes, right? And it's 2 different intervals. 3 notes, 2 intervals. So when you're thinking of this one, if you're thinking about, don't just sing, I'm gonna sing note 1, note 2, note 3. Think of interval 1 and interval 2. That's one of the first things about singing beautifully music, is that you don't think about notes. You think about everything that isn't the notes. But these particular 3 notes, or these particular 2 intervals, are very interesting. And they fascinated other composers as well. The first note, the first interval, Ave, is going up what's known as a 4th. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the second one is a descending 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, up to 4th, down to 6. And Mozart wrote this. I'm sure that people knew about it, this little piece. It became very beloved very quickly. And the first person I know to really work on it well, to get inspired by just these 3 notes, is Beethoven, where he wrote a beautiful song, which I've sung a number of times, which is called An die ferne Geliebte. And it's in a slightly different key, but it goes, Auf dem Hügel sitz ich stehend. Same note, da-di-dum. Then, later on, a little bit later on, Schubert came up with, said, hey, this is a really great, these are great three things too. So let's try that. Du holde Kunst, a beautiful ode to art. Oh, you beautiful art. Another beautiful song that everybody should learn. So just these very 3 notes already open up something that obviously inspired many of the greatest composers, Western classical composers. But then let's look at the next so-called measure, which is Ave. Here's something very interesting. Brings up many implications. First of all, you're going down Ave. You're going down what's called a half step, in half steps. So it's 3 notes again, but 2 half steps. This time equal, but they're going down in da-di-dum, like that. And he could have written this. He could have written this song. Ave, ave, verum corpus. It sounds nice and so forth, right? But he added that middle note. Ave, ave, which is like something that throws things a little bit off and tells you that there's something else going on here. And indeed, if you play that against the bass line, which is let's all sing, let's do this. Let's just sitting down. Just go, first of all, everybody just go, Ave, Ave, and hold that middle note. Ready? Now, all the men, I want you to sing, Ave, Ave. Just that. It's the 4 notes, the same note. That's the lower D there. Ready? Okay, now I want you to do this. The basses do that, and keep holding that note, and then the ladies, Ave, ah, and hold that note. And as the basses are holding the ah, let's try that. Ready? Some people call that a dissonance, but what it is, it's one of the, it divides the octave equally. Right, and then it's da da dee da 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 dee da da dum. And it's an area of instability. And it used to be known, that interval, in the Middle Ages, where everybody wanted to have everything static and unchanging, and even in music they didn't want anything to change, and that particular interval was very disruptive, and they called it the devil's interval for that reason. They said, we can't have this, forget it. So imagine that, and just a few centuries later, composers being composers and realizing that they wanted to, we needed to actually develop this medium of music, and especially J.S. Bach, he went crazy on this so-called devil's interval and turned it into the angel's interval. So that's the first thing about it. But now bring another aspect of it. When you're doing da-dee-dum, well, okay, first, the first 2 notes. Go back to the first note. Dum, dum. Right on that. To turn at your page, if you look at top of page 4, the very last 2 notes in the soprano, right, in more. In more. You see that? In more. And notice that's a different interval. That's a 5th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to the opening, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the first thing. Mozart set this up, and that's called, it's actually an inversion in 2 different ways, the 5th and the 4th. Any good thinker and any composer who thinks about this thinks in terms of inverting things. In this case, if you take, you can say that the 4th and the 5th complete the octave, right? You have it can complete but it's also a kind of inversion as well. Now, again, the second one, I don't want to talk a lot about it, but the second one is, if you look what happens right after that, and again, in fact, that on page 4, in more. Well, what's that? Isn't that ha-da-dee going down? Instead, it's moving up. No. And indeed, that's the top of the piece. And that's the piece that begins to sort of fill out the entire piece in a very beautiful way. What I'd like to do now is let's just sing just the melody. Everybody can just sing the melody. It's a beautiful melody. It's not too high. Notice that this doesn't even go into the 3rd register. This just goes into the 1st and 2nd registers. So it's not that difficult even for people with lower voices to sing. So let's try it. And we'll just sing Ave Verum Corpus. Oh, let me just see the words. Natum de Maria Virgine, right, born of Virgin Mary. Right. Vere Passum, right, he died. Immolatum, and injured, right, in crucem, on the cross for us, pro homine, right, and whose side, huius latus, perforatum, is perforated, and from unda fluxit, et sanguine, means, and it, from that side flowed water and blood. And then the last thing is est nobis pregustatum. This gives us a foretaste of our trial of death, by which is meant, in a literal way, it's a foretaste of the great banquet of heaven that is in front of you after death. But I think that it's not just a question of dying and then, it's not an image where you just go in and then you have a lot to eat when you go to heaven. I think it's a much higher idea of a delicious sweetness of truth that awaits your legacy, because the sweetness is of who you are is what you leave behind you and the good that you leave behind you. So let's just try it. Ave Verum. Okay, ready? Let's stand. Let's stand. It's so much nicer to stand and sing, if you can. If you have trouble standing, then stay down. You know, don't want to force anybody. It's always better. Okay? Ready? And. Let's everybody sing the bass line. So you can do the bass line. It's easy. It's easy. Just follow along. It's in a different so-called clef in a key, but it's basically pretty easy to follow. It's moving along. It's mostly dum, bum, 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 bum. Okay, ave, ready? Yeah. look at that mortis. Notice da 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 dum. Isn't that interesting? Dee da dum. Think of na dee da dee da dum in the B opening. This is da da dum, but also going in contrary motion in inversion. Na da dum. It's happening both at the same time. So let's try to put that together. Men, you can all sing the bass line. Ladies, you can sing the things, or anybody who wants to sing soprano. Okay, ready? Let's try it. Okay, let's do the opening. Start on the same note. And the ladies come in first. People here know the alto and the tenor lines, so I'd like those people who know it, I'd like those people who know it to do that, and we'll do it one more time with all four parts. See if we can do that, okay? So it's altos, tenors, basses, sopranos. Okay, here we go. Ready?
Beautiful. I know we're coming up on time here. I know if we still have Helga on the line, I'd like to see if Helga has a few remarks on the panel today. Would you like to make any remarks?
Well, I think that you have just experienced, there is an echo. I think you have just experienced with the Ave Verum what it requires. And I think this formerly great civilization of ours, the European civilization of which the United States is a part, then we have to evoke that exactly in the minds and the souls of the people. And, you know, I think if we all put our minds to it, I think we can catalyze a Renaissance movement. I think we can reach out to all the beautiful artists like Elvira. It was so good to hear and see you again. And, you know, that we can maybe gather around like we used to have many years ago when we were working with, you know, many of the great musicians of the United States. I think we can make an effort to revive that. And if we combine it with a dialogue of cultures like we have seen it today with music from China, from Persia and Albania and so forth, I think we can absolutely do it because there are so many people who are very distraught about the present level of cultures, teachers, parents, people who have to work with an increasing number of juvenile delinquents. And I think we should make a commitment going out of this session to do exactly that. So that's really what I would like to conclude this session with.
We will see you at 7 o'clock.